I was in my own basement, standing behind a stack of old paint cans, completely still, barely breathing. Why? Because I had just watched 3 men in HOA uniforms. Yes, the same cheerful folks who sent birthday cards and find my neighbor for lawn clippings, unload 4 duffel bags into my own basement. They thought I wasn't home. They didn't know I was recording. They didn't know who I really was. The HOA president, Mr. Walter Green, who everyone called Mr. Sunday Smile, stood in my basement next to my furnace, wiping his gloved hands and saying, "No one suspects a thing. This house is the perfect front. He's just a boring history teacher." That was the moment I knew, this wasn't just petty HOA nonsense. This was organized crime. And the house they were using for their operations? My hands trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. Because what they really didn't know was this. I'm not just a history teacher. I'm an undercover agent for the federal government. And they had just walked into my trap. But just as I moved to send the video to my agency contact, I heard a creak behind me. Footsteps. Coming closer. And the voice of a man I had never seen before saying, "He's not who you think he is." A cold piece of metal, definitely a gun, pressed into my lower back. The mysterious man's voice had returned, calm but cold. "He's not who you think he is." I didn't move. I didn't turn around. My instincts kicked in. Observe, memorize, survive. "Drop your phone, teacher," he growled. I let it fall to the ground gently, screen still aglow with my paused recording of the HOA leaders hauling criminal goods into my basement. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then I slowly raised my hands. "You've been poking around," he said. "But you picked the wrong house." The man yanked my arm back and shoved me against the furnace wall. For a second, I could see his reflection in the nearby metal surface. Tall, white, early 30s. Was cut. Tactical vest under a work shirt. He didn't look like any HOA board member I'd ever met. He looked trained. "Who sent you?" he asked. I had to think fast. Revealing my agency identity without backup could blow everything. But lying might get me killed. So I told half the truth. "I'm a school teacher. But I saw something. I just recorded what was happening." He eyed me. Then, to my surprise, he chuckled softly. "School teacher, huh? You've got better surveillance gear than my entire squad." He took a step back and flicked off the safety on his gun. That's when I knew I had one chance. "If I'm gone tonight," I said, "this video gets sent to every local agency in North Carolina, including federal crime units. My data backup is live." It was a bluff. But he paused. And then he smiled. "Smart," he muttered, finally lowering the gun. "Too smart." He reached into his back pocket and threw something onto the dusty floor. A badge. FBI. My jaw nearly hit the floor. "Wait, you're one of us?" "Agent Cole McKinley. Deep cover. Task Force 17C. I've been embedded in this HOA for 11 months. You almost blew my operation." I stared at him, stunned. "You're telling me you've been part of this criminal ring?" "No. I've been watching it. Same as you." He motioned toward the duffel bags. "Those bags? I tagged them with microchips last week. We tracked them moving across 3 states, always ending up here. But I couldn't prove it until now. So, why pull a gun on me?" He grinned faintly. "Because I thought you were one of them." Now that the tension had broken slightly, I knelt beside one of the bags. Unzipping it fully, I found several black envelopes with bank account info and offshore wire transfers. Maps with marked up locations around Pine Ridge. One photo of me. I held it up. "Why is my picture in this?" Agent McKinley looked genuinely confused. Then he snatched it from my hand and stared hard. "That wasn't part of the original package. This is new." On the back of the photo were scribbled words. "Test if he breaks. If not, remove him." They were onto me. Someone inside the HOA had begun to suspect I wasn't just a harmless teacher. They planned to test me, or kill me. "They're planning something," McKinley said. "Something big. That's why the HOA's been expanding security patrols and rewriting bylaws without community votes." He pointed to the ceiling. "Your house is a hub. It sits on top of an old emergency cable network built during the Cold War. They're using it to send signals, encrypted messages, underground lines, untraceable." The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. Wore my usual khakis. Drove to work. Taught 7th grade history class. But I felt every eye in the neighborhood on me when I returned. One of the regular HOA patrols passed slowly by my house twice, pretending to take notes. A neighbor, old Mrs. Camden, joked, "Maybe the HOA's just being helpful." Then came the inspection notices. Apparently, I had violated HOA rules by having a green trash bin instead of the standard black. That was funny, because the bin was there when I moved in, and it matched everyone else's. Still, I was fined $75. When I tried to question it, Walter Green showed up. Big smile. White polo. Thin mustache. Just trying to keep our community consistent, Evan. You understand, right? Order. That's how we thrive. His voice had a calm edge that didn't sit right with me. A week later, I got home and found a small package on my porch. No label. No return address. Inside, a USB flash drive. No message. Just a video file titled, HOA_footage_0314.mov. I plugged it into my secure laptop and watched as a fuzzy security feed showed 3 men in HOA vests breaking into a neighbor's garage, removing boxes, then replacing the lock as if nothing happened. The timestamp? 2:46 a.m. The neighbor in the footage? Mr. Peterson. He died the week before of a heart attack. That was the moment I knew I had to go deeper. This wasn't just shady HOA billing or power-tripping patrol officers. Something darker was happening. I started noticing more of them, HOA inspectors walking around with no clipboards, just radios and earpieces. At night, I'd hear trucks rumbling past the 10 p.m. HOA curfew rule. Some mornings, parts of my security camera footage were missing. I upgraded my system. Hidden cams. Motion sensors. Facial recognition. Still, they always seemed one step ahead. Until last Friday. Friday I stayed home pretending to be sick. That's when I heard the faint knock on my back door. A boy. Barely 12. Dirty hands, messy hair, tears in his eyes. He whispered, "Are you Mr. Blake?" I nodded. "They told me to give this to you." He dropped a key in my hand and ran off. Confused, I followed the markings on the key. It matched the rusted padlock to the old HOA maintenance shed at the far end of the neighborhood, behind the tennis court. That night after midnight I snuck out. I opened the shed. Inside was a hidden passageway that led directly to my basement. That explained how they were entering. That explained why I sometimes heard footsteps in the walls. But what it didn't explain was why. Until tonight. When I caught them. The duffel bags they unloaded? One was already open. Inside. Stacks of money. Weapons. Fake documents. I had all of it on video. Proof. But as I tried to escape, I felt the cold edge of steel press against my back. That unfamiliar voice whispered again. "He's not who you think he is." And everything went black. I woke up handcuffed in the back of a white delivery van. Tracy beside me, unconscious. My wrists burned. My ears rang from the explosion. Through a narrow window, I could see we were still inside Pine Ridge. They hadn't left. And then I realized, they weren't planning to take us away. They were planning to make us vanish right here. The van stopped. Doors swung open. Walter Green stood with a smile. "I'll admit it, Evan. You've caused us trouble. But all that ends tonight." "You can't silence the truth," I said. "It's already out there." He tilted his head. "We'll see." Suddenly, another van screeched into the lot, slamming into the HOA truck. It was McKinley. Bleeding. Bruised. Alive. He kicked open his door and opened fire, forcing Walter and his men to scramble for cover. "Get in," he shouted. Tracy was still groggy, but I yanked her arm and dove out of the van, rolling onto the pavement. McKinley dragged her in and I jumped behind the wheel. We took off, tires screeching. But as we reached the neighborhood's main exit gate, we saw it, a barricade of HOA trucks. Armed guards. Drones hovering above. And in the center, a massive red stop sign glowing in our path. "They knew we'd try this route," McKinley said. "We're boxed in. Then we go through it," I said. "That's suicide." "Not if we time it right." He stared at me. I floored the gas. We barreled toward the gate, 80 miles per hour. Guards raised weapons. I veered left, toward the garden shed entrance to the storm drains. We crashed through the fence, splinters flying. Straight into the tunnel system below Pine Ridge. Inside the tunnel we didn't stop. We drove as far as the van could go before footpaths took over. Tracy was awake now, limping but determined. That's when we found it. A sealed chamber, full of boxes. I opened one. Dynamite. Boxes and boxes of explosives. "What is this?" Tracy gasped. McKinley scanned the labels. C4. Detonators. They were going to blow this place. Burn it clean. "You think they were preparing for a raid?" I asked. "No," he said grimly. "They were preparing to erase Pine Ridge. The entire HOA is a front, for something way bigger." Behind us, footsteps echoed again. The HOA guards were in the tunnels. And the timer on one of the devices had just started counting down. Red numbers blinked on a device buried in the explosives hidden beneath Pine Ridge Estates. 14 minutes and 52 seconds. 14 minutes and 51 seconds. McKinley, Tracy, and I stood frozen, surrounded by crates of C4 detonators and high-grade accelerants. The HOA had turned the storm drain tunnels into a kill box, a final solution if everything went south. And based on the guards now chasing us through the tunnels, it had gone south. "We need to defuse it," Tracy said, limping toward the timer. McKinley pulled her back. "It's too risky. That rig is military grade. If it's tampered with, it might blow instantly." I scanned the tunnel layout. "Then we don't defuse it. We divert it." "Come again?" McKinley asked. "The old Cold War tunnels, remember? These pipes stretch outside the HOA perimeter. We route the blast pressure through the west exit. Collapse the drains safely outside the community." He looked at me, then nodded slowly. "That might work. But we'd need to trigger the fail-safe release." "Where's that?" Tracy pointed down a narrow shaft. "Maintenance hatch. Quarter mile. Past the valve gate." I glanced back at the timer. 13 minutes and 22 seconds. We didn't have time to hesitate. We started running. The tunnels were tight, wet, and twisted. We ducked low-hanging pipes and climbed over debris. Behind us, footsteps pounded louder. Then, a flare exploded against the tunnel wall, lighting everything in a hot red glow. "Down?" McKinley shouted, pushing us into an alcove. Gunfire rattled the concrete. A bullet grazed my arm. I gritted my teeth and kept going. 11 minutes and 19 seconds. We reached the valve gate, a rusted wheel with a locking mechanism. McKinley pulled bolt cutters from his belt. 30 seconds, he muttered. Tracy covered him with a broken pipe. I held a wrench like a baseball bat ready to swing. One of the guards appeared, mask on, rifle up. "Don't move," he barked. "Back off," I shouted. He hesitated, then pulled the trigger. Click. Out of ammo. I swung the wrench hard. He went down. McKinley popped the lock. We burst through the valve gate and into the control chamber. The fail-safe switch was inside a control box mounted on the wall. McKinley yanked open the panel, scanned the switches, and said, "Someone has to stay behind to activate the release once you two are clear." I froze. "No way. We find a remote solution." "There isn't one." Tracy stepped forward. "I'll do it." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You've done enough. I'm the reason this mess got this far." But McKinley was already moving. He pressed the switch halfway, then turned to us. "Both of you, go. Now. You'll die." He smiled faintly. I didn't come this far to hide behind paperwork. Tracy and I ran. The last thing I saw was him standing at the switch, hand raised like a statue. We crawled through the western duct as the timer dropped past 2:12. The tunnel narrowed, then opened to the edge of the forest outside Pine Ridge. We tumbled out, gasping, coughing, soaked in dirt and fear. Behind us, the dull rumble of concrete shaking. Then, boom. A muffled explosion underground. The trees trembled. Smoke coiled from the hidden exit. McKinley was gone. Tracy collapsed beside me, tears mixing with mud on her face. 3 hours later, we sat in the back of a black SUV. Helicopters hovered overhead. The FBI had finally arrived. The video files, the flash drive, and Tracy's evidence had been delivered through the agency's backup servers. Once they lost contact with me, the Bureau tracked emergency motion sensors around Pine Ridge. They knew something was wrong. By sunrise, Pine Ridge was under federal lockdown. Agents raided homes, arrested HOA officers, uncovered weapons caches and millions in laundered money. Walter Green? Nowhere to be found. "He had an escape route," one agent muttered. "Probably planned for this for years." Tracy stared at the sunrise. "He won't stay hidden forever." I nodded. The media ran the story as the quietest suburb turned crime syndicate. But no one really knew how close they came to disaster. McKinley was honored posthumously. Tracy was placed under protection. And me? I was offered a desk job in D.C., but I declined. Tracy was given witness protection. A new identity. A new state. She wanted me to come with her, to leave this life behind. "You've done enough," she told me, her voice soft. "Let someone else chase ghosts." "He's not a ghost. He's a shadow. And shadows only disappear when you shine the light long enough." She hugged me. Held on longer than I expected. "Just promise me, if you catch him you'll stop." I wanted to promise. But I didn't. 2 months passed. Then a coded message from an old contact at Homeland Security arrived. Redbird Lodge. Flagstaff. HOA seminar scheduled. Guest list includes alias, Henry Wallace. That was Walter's game. Moving from suburb to suburb, rebuilding influence under different names. I drove 13 hours nonstop, checked into a dusty motel under a fake name, and sat in on the HOA Leadership Summit, held in a luxury lodge tucked in the woods. There were HOA managers, realtors, private security heads. And one man in the back with salt and pepper hair, clean-shaven, and a name tag that read, Henry W. He laughed softly. He asked questions. He wore khakis and loafers like every other board administrator. But I knew that voice. That night I followed him. Watched him leave the seminar early, disappear behind the staff hallway, and enter a restricted service room. I waited. When he came out, I stepped in front of him. He stopped, smiled, as if we were just two friends bumping into each other after years. Well, Evan, he said slowly, you found me. You made it too easy. Oh no, he replied. You made it too personal. I pulled my badge. This is the end of the road. Is it? Suddenly, I felt the cold muzzle of a gun press into my ribs from behind. Another man. Big, quiet, armed. Let's not do anything foolish, Walter said with a wink. But I wasn't alone. Remember the bird feeder transmitter back in Pine Ridge? I had a new one, in the heel of my boot. And it had been broadcasting everything. 5 seconds later, floodlights exploded through the lodge windows. Voices shouted. Federal agents. Drop your weapons. The man behind me swung his pistol, but I was faster, spinning, elbowing his arm, grabbing his wrist. He fell. Walter ran. I chased him through the back of the lodge, through the kitchen, past chefs and servers screaming. Outside, snow started to fall. Walter slipped. I tackled him hard into the ice. He groaned. You can't stop it, he hissed. There are others. I'm just the first. Then I'll be the first to bring you in. Walter was cuffed. Arrested. Hauled away under federal protection. The Bureau offered me commendations, promotions, and press coverage. I refused it all. Instead, I stood at the edge of Redbird Lodge, staring out into the snow. Because Walter was right about one thing. He wasn't alone. A week later, I received a package at my agency mailbox. Inside, a flash drive. Encrypted. Anonymous. Once decrypted, it revealed a map, red pins scattered across America. Every one labeled with HOA chapters connected to Pine Ridge. And a name. Project Civic Vale. A covert network using suburban HOAs to launder money, traffic weapons, and gather citizen data. Pine Ridge was just the beginning. Walter wasn't the only leader. He was a middle manager. I met with my handler. Do you want to go out? He asked. No, I said. I wanted deeper. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every small-town American who thought they were safe behind a white fence. It was about exposing the corruption hiding under the homeowners' smiles. And it was about finishing what McKinley started. My name is Evan Blake. And I was never just a teacher.